Hello everyone and welcome back to Destiny. Today we're kicking off a little series of videos which will dive into Destiny 2's problems that are so large that changing them, like they have changed some things in Destiny 2 with the release of Forsaken, has left behind what I affectionately refer to as Year 1 scar tissue. Things like exotics that promote wearing double primaries, things like the Prestige mode still existing, Year 1 Masterworks living alongside Year 2 Masterworks. Essentially, things are just out of place and that don't inform the narrative Bungie is pushing now as far as moving this towards more of a hobbyist game. As a result, some of the changes we're going to go over may not see the light of day, or perhaps shouldn't be seeing the light of day until Destiny 3 or whatever the next major release of Destiny ends up being. Despite their assurances that they are dedicated to the Destiny franchise, they have not confirmed a third major title release, let alone it being called Destiny 3, but for our purposes, we'll go ahead and refer to whatever the next major release is as Destiny 3. And for the record, I am in full support of a single platform that can be constantly updated for years and years, but I don't want that platform to be Destiny 2, as you will see why in these videos. And today, we're going to jump into subclasses, their perks, and by extension, we're going to talk a little bit about exotic armor as well. If you end up enjoying the video, a positive rating is much appreciated, and be sure to subscribe to the channel. We have some Anthem and Division content coming up pretty soon, as well as our continued Destiny coverage. So with all that out of the way, let's get into it. Alright, so it's important for me to quickly establish a little baseline theory for us to work with so you understand the context and purpose of the ideas presented in these videos. So when it comes to Destiny 1, its depth of RPG mechanics would probably score something around a 6 out of 10. Not very in-depth, but better than Destiny 2's depth, which at launch I would rate maybe a 2, maybe a 3/4 now with Forsaken. But Destiny 2 was designed to be more friendly to casual players, which means that the devs wanted less time in menus, tracking, reading, min-maxing, and more time shooting aliens in the face. With Destiny 3, the rumors have it that we will be swinging the pendulum in the opposite direction and leaning more into deeper RPG systems, so the purpose of these ideas, at least for me, is to get Destiny's RPG depth to an 8, maybe a 7 even, to be honest. It doesn't have to be Diablo, but there's still plenty that it could do to get back up to surpassing Destiny 1's system and then going a little beyond that. Like more specificity, for instance, when it comes to things like perk descriptions, give us actual numbers, things of that nature. Anyways, let's start this series of videos by talking about subclasses. Subclasses is an ongoing point of contention, with the main issue being the fact that perks are locked into focus clusters and you can't mix and match the perks from the different sets. In Destiny 1, you had complete freedom to choose whichever perks you wanted from each of the columns. Now, it's very clear that they had no intention of changing this in D2. In fact, on the contrary, they're leaning pretty hard into it with Forsaken by giving you a third focus to choose for every subclass. We don't know if they even intend to change it for D3, but one could hope that if they want to lean more into deeper RPG mechanics, that they would want to free up the subclass system quite a bit. Now, one of the reasons that I don't see them changing it in D2 is because, unfortunately, it wouldn't be as simple as letting you select different nodes from the different clusters. Knowing Bungie, they're going to want to take their time and do it the right way, and currently some of the perks are so reliant on the other perks within the same focus that they wouldn't really work well or even sometimes make sense on their own. A great example of this is with Gunslinger's focus way of the sharpshooter. We have the super modifier called Crowd Pleaser, which enables precision damage for Golden Gun, a very important perk if you would like to utilize the passive ability of Line 'em Up, which extends the damage and duration of Golden Gun with precision hits, a perk that becomes completely useless with 6-shooter. So you can see that the subclass perks would have to be completely revamped in most cases for mixing and matching to really work. Now, we could simply revert back to Destiny 1, but I do believe that there is some value from the design and the implementation of Destiny 2 subclass system that could prove to be pretty useful when coming up with a new solution. And of course, it wouldn't be a FutureFoe idea video without some kind of Photoshop, so here we go. True to Destiny 2's design philosophy, we have this layout you see before you. Now, as a disclaimer, I fully expect the subclasses to be completely revamped for the next iteration. There's even rumors of things like light and darkness subclasses, but for our purposes, we'll use Night Stalker as our proof of concept. I'll leave this on screen for a good while so you can take your time looking at it, but let's go over how this addresses a lot of the issues. First up, let's talk about the design. Now, I want to preface that this is just a first pass, but I feel like we kind of have the best of both worlds with this, the crossroads of Destiny 1's freedom of choice and the visual organization of Destiny 2. The idea here is that we no longer have clusters that you are locked into. Now, each of these clusters represents a choice. They are clearly separate and laid out in a way that makes sense with the utilization of these vertical columns. Now, you'll notice this does even account for new supers, but instead of them being awkwardly shoehorned in, we see separate giant nodes for each of them, making it very quick and very easy to switch between. So let's start with everything to the left of the super nodes. Just like in D2, we're maintaining the concept that everything in this area is subclass neutral, meaning that they are the same for each of the subclasses and not really too affected by the subclass choices to the right. So starting all the way to the left, we have jump and grenade, but what's going on with class and movement here? Well, one area that I hope Bungie evolves a little bit in the next game is the core neutral game experience. They've done it before with adding the ability to auto-mantle, and I think they have room to innovate even more. I'd love to see even more dynamic movement in Destiny's combat, and something to further differentiate each of the classes. Also, since dodge felt oddly selfish inside of Destiny 2 when compared to Rift and Barricade anyways, this is our chance to fix that. So now, Hunter's new class ability is no longer dodge, but is in fact smoke. This means that yes, smoke is even available to gunslingers and arc striders. The choices are corrosive and snare, damage or trap your enemy. And then the dodge is now moved to the Hunter's unique movement ability, complete with a return to Destiny 1's cooldown times, maybe shown with a fourth square in your HUD. I haven't really decided on that part yet. But the example of how this would work with Titan and Warlock would be them keeping their current class abilities, but for the Titan, they would gain a shoulder charge usable for mobility and maybe given a short cooldown timer. It's not as strong as shoulder charges are currently in the game. You would have to spec into things like seismic strike to get extra damage and the other effects as well. Think of it as a naked shoulder charge that maybe does 60 to 70% of the current damage. For the Warlock, I'd give it Phoenix Dive, again naked without the recovery effect. Once you've spec'd into it, then you could have things like damaging nearby enemies or other effects that have to do with the Phoenix Dive. Then you have the choice of super. Each super has a couple choices to modify how it behaves. A good example is the top node here, which has Shadow Shot, and then the options are of course Mobius Quiver and Deadfall. For Spectral Blades, you could add things like being able to throw blades forward or maybe adding the ability to blink for a little D1 Hunter taste. Then next to that, you have your options for the different melees, and of course with this particular example, Night Stalker no longer having the smoke grenade available as their melee, they are freed up to have some actual melee overrides, and here are a few that I came up with just sort of off the top of my head. We have Silent Strike, striking enemies from behind does double damage, Shattering Strike, which is the same as it is currently with Spectral Blades, and then Vengeful Strike, plants an available smoke bomb on your target with a delayed detonation. So think the new Nova Warp melee, where you plant that little explosive onto their chest. So think of that with a smoke grenade, but you have to have a smoke charge available to use. I thought that might be pretty cool. Then the next column after that is a brand new addition, and that is a class override perk. This is where things like Seismic Strike and Hammer Strike would be. They would give your class ability a bit of subclass flavor. So in our Night Stalker example, it could be the following. These would be your options. Lockdown, grenades and smoke last twice as long. Vanish and smoke, your smoke cloud makes you and nearby allies invisible for 7 seconds. Smoke monster, each enemy caught in smoke grants 10% smoke charge back. So you can see all these had to do with smoke because smoke is now the new Hunter class ability that can be modified with these perks. I think this would get people to use class abilities a bit more often and give you some serious added utility. So for the Warlock using Rift, you could do things like reload weapons upon activation, it could cause damage to the enemies that step inside it. For the Titan, the barricades could emit health or maybe cause elemental damage, kind of like how a couple of the Titan exotics do right now. Finally, you have 2 columns of passives similar to how it was in Destiny 1. I won't go over all of the perks right now because it's sort of besides the point, but I'll go ahead and leave them on screen in case you want to pause and read them just to get an idea of some of the ideas that I had. You'll notice a lot of Destiny 1 in these examples, and that's for a good reason. That was a pretty good setup, so we're honoring that here as well. Then the final coup de grace would be speccing into focuses. Now, you might be a little hesitant on that, but hear me out. Giving perk options that would work for all supers means that you can find paths that work really well together. Bungie could reward this by preserving the paths from Destiny 2, but lining them up horizontally. So for instance, if you lined up all the top row, it could give you a +2 stat boost to your resilience, recovery, or mobility, maintaining the spirit of Destiny 1 again. So essentially, rewarding and incentivizing speccing into paths, but of course, you're not locked into that. Now that leaves us with the topic of exotic armor, and for the most part, I'm okay with it behaving more like it did in Destiny 1, where most of the exotic just simply granted you free nodes within each of the columns, allowing you to utilize 2 perks within a column instead of just 1. I would also like them to focus on some missed opportunities within the classes, like a new version of Sealed Ahamkara Grasps. Instead of what it currently does, rapid hits upon the same target generates orbs of light for you and your allies. I like this because it's subclass neutral, and of course is going to be pretty sweet during boss fights. This eliminates the 6-shooter precision damage issue that we touched on before, because it adds the orb generation ability to every single super, including both flavors of Golden Gun. And you could have this same exact exotic ability be part of the subclass in one of the passive columns, and then you could switch into something else in that same column, maybe the return of Combust from Destiny 1. That could be just one example. But anyways, that's just one solution for the subclass issues within Destiny 2. A happy medium is possible. It grants an insane amount of customization and purpose to your choices, but keeps the whole thing pretty approachable, user-friendly, and supports easy mode. Anyways, let me know what you think of these ideas in the comments below. What would you change? What are some of your ideas for fixing the whole subclass issue? Also, would you be open to a revamp like this inside of Destiny 2? Or do you think it's a little too late and it might be confusing too many players to change it this drastically? As I mentioned at the top of the video, the game has a lot of scar tissue from how drastic of a change it did, even more drastic I would say than Destiny 1's transformation around Taken King. Anyways, again, let me know if you enjoyed this video series. If you have an idea, leave it down below. Thanks for watching, happy gaming, and I will see you all next time.